Okay, moving on to 1.6. Now we're going to multiply and divide real numbers. And multiply and divide have the different. So what we're learning today is how to multiply and divide real numbers. Okay, if you're multiplying two numbers and you have different signs, your product will be negative. And the product is what you get when you multiply two numbers. But if you're multiplying two numbers and they have the same sign, your product will be positive. So if you have a positive times a negative, that's going to be negative. But if you have a positive times a positive, that will be positive. Or a negative times a negative, that will be positive. Alright, so A. For example 1, I've got a positive times a negative, so my answer will be negative. And then 12 times 18 is 96. B, I have a positive times a positive, so that will be positive. And 24 times a half is 12. C, I have a negative times a positive, so my final answer will be a negative. And then you just multiply straight across the top of a fraction to get 3. And then multiply straight across the bottom and you get 8. So negative 3/8. D, negative 3 squared. You need to rewrite that as negative 3 times negative 3, and that gives you positive 9 because they have the same sign. Alright, guided practice number 1. I want you to pause it and try it on your own. I'm going to give you the answers in just a second. Okay, A is negative 90. B is positive 2.4. C is negative 21 over 50. And D is positive 16. Okay, now let's do square roots. What's the simplified form of each expression? The square root of 25. What you have to do to find a square root is you have to figure out what multiplies by itself 2 times to get that number. So what number multiplies by itself 2 times to give you 25? That's right, it's 5. Since the negative is outside of the radical, or the square root symbol, then my final answer is going to be negative because it stays on front. Alright, B, I've got plus minus the square root of 4 over 49. That plus minus sign, whatever sign is out front stays out front. That plus minus sign means positive and negative. So that essentially means two different numbers, a positive and a negative. But that sign's going to stay out front, and then the square root of 4 is going to be on top, and the square root of 49 is going to be on the bottom. Well, the square root of 4 is 2, and the square root of 49 is 7, so my final answer is plus or minus the 2 over 7. Alright, I'm going to do some more of these with you. So the square root of 64 is going to be positive 8. Plus or minus the square root of 16 is going to be plus or minus 4. Negative square root of 121 is going to be negative 11. And then plus or minus the square root of 1 over 36 is going to be plus or minus 1 over 6. Okay, so dividing real numbers. If you're dividing two numbers and they have different signs, your quotient will be negative. And the quotient is the number you get when you divide two numbers. If you're dividing two numbers and they have the same sign, your quotient will be positive. Alright, so I have a skydiver whose elevation changes by negative 3,600 feet in 4 minutes after the parachute opens. What is the average change in the skydiver's elevation each minute? So I've got negative 3,600 for 4 minutes. So we're going to divide it by 4, and I get negative 900. Negative because they're different signs, so I'm going to have a negative quotient. Say negative 900 feet. Alright, guided practice 3. You make 5 withdrawals of equal amounts from your bank account. The total amount you withdraw is $360. What is the change in your account balance each time you make a withdrawal? So if I withdraw a total of $360 through 5 withdrawals, so I'm going to divide it by 5. Then I just got a positive divided by a positive. Although it does say withdrawal, so we'll call it negative. So we have a negative divided by a positive, which is going to give me a negative. And then if you divide that, you get $72. So my average withdrawal is 72. What you need to get from this is that if you divide two numbers with different signs, you get a negative, and if you divide two numbers with the same sign, you get a positive. Now we're going to do one more thing. It's called the inverse multiplication property, and it has everything to do with fractions. If you have a fraction, let's just say for every number, there is a multiplicative inverse. That word is multiplicative, and then inverse. So if I have A, my multiplicative inverse is 1 over A, which is the reciprocal of A. So, for example, my multiplicative inverse of 3 is 1 over 3, and that means when I multiply, I get 1. My multiplicative inverse of 1/4 is going to be 4 over 1, or 4, and when I multiply those, I get 1. Okay, the reciprocal of a non-zero real number is the flipped fraction. So A over B is going to be B over A. Alright, example 4, dividing fractions. What is the value of x divided by y when x is negative 3/4 and y is negative 2/3? So they really want to know what is negative 3/4 divided by negative 2/3. When you divide fractions, I need you to keep, change, flip. So that's going to keep the first fraction like it is, change the division to multiplication, and then change the second fraction, or flip the second fraction, so negative 3 over 2. Now you'll notice that with the second fraction, it looks like the negatives with the 2, and then when I rewrote it, I put the negative with the 3. I always, in a fraction, put the negative with the top number. It doesn't matter where it goes, but for me, I like it to be with the top number. So now we're just multiplying fractions, so you multiply straight across the top, straight across the bottom, and you get 9 over 8. Okay, now let's do one more, and we'll do this one together. So we're going to keep 3/4, change division and multiplication, and flip 5/2. We're going to put the negative in the top. So we get 3 times negative 2, which is negative 6, and we get 4 times 5, which is 20. You also always have to think about reducing fractions. So since both of those are even numbers, you can divide them by 2, so I get negative 3 over 10. And that's going to be my final answer. Okay? Pause the video, do these 4 questions on your own on a separate sheet of paper, show every bit of work that you do. I don't care if you can do it in your head, you have to show it to me on paper, and bring it to me in class tomorrow. If you do not do a question, you do not get credit, and writing down the question is not an attempt.